Wow. Welcome everybody to a brand new episode of Identity Talk for Educators Live, the show for the unsung heroes of education. I'm your host, Kwame Sarfo-Mensah. If this is your first time tuning in to the podcast, I welcome you and I hope that you come back for future episodes and more dope content. If you're a returning viewer and listener to the podcast, I welcome you back and I hope that tonight's episode is one that is informative, insightful, and enlightening to your ears. So before we get to the main event, I want to just share a few announcements. First and foremost, we have our Stay True to Teacher and You virtual summit that's coming up on April 16th through 19th. And we have some phenomenal educators who are going to be joining us and pouring into us for 4 days. So we have here Mr. Brian Keith Harris, the ultimate preacher. We have Mr. Teach Hustle Inspire and Dr. Sean Woodley. We have the revolutionary principal in Amen Ra out in Compton, the insightful teacher, Mr. Rakim Jenkins. Shauna Brown, Teach for the Culture. We have so many phenomenal educators who are going to be pouring into us. And this is an event that is like no other, where you're going to get professional development that you're probably not going to get in your respective school districts. So to learn more about the summit, make sure you tap in and go to identitytalkforeducators.com/conference to get more information about that. And then also, we have our Identity Talk apparel line where we have new designs for all educators, whether you're a librarian, whether you're a STEAM educator, whether you're a classroom teacher, whatever your role is, we have something for you. So if you're looking for some new gear for this new spring season, make sure you tap into the Teespring store at teesprings.com/stores/the Identity Talk apparel shop. All right. And those are the announcements. Now let's get to the main event. So this is going to be a special episode because, as you all know, I am a Connecticut native through and through, represent the 860 to the fullest, even though I've been around in other states and countries. So this brother is just phenomenal. I've been following him for a while, just following his work. And he is somebody who's a trendsetter. He is somebody who is just doing so much, not just within the state of Connecticut, but just beyond that, just through his work. He's a DJ, he's an activist, he's an educator. He's just so many things to so many people. And I am truly humbled and honored to have him on this podcast to just share his story and what he's doing, within his respective communities. So without further ado, I want to bring in the good brother, Mr. Justis Lopez, aka DJ Pharaoh, aka Social Justice. So many monikers, but we're going to bring the brother on so he can share his story and get this thing going. My man.
Hey, peace, family, peace.
What's going on, man?
All is well. Counting my blessings and incredibly thankful to be here in this space to break bread and share community and conversation with you. And shout out to the upcoming conference that you got coming up. I'm really excited to be in community with that. And shout out to the dope threads and apparel that you got too. Can't wait to cop my hoodie and t-shirt. So just really super thankful, fam, to be here in community and space. And as you had mentioned, always great to break bread with a Connecticut native and talk and just fellowship. So thankful, family. Thankful.
Yes, sir. So let's get right in because we have so much to break bread about. So first question I'd like to ask all my guests is to tell us a little bit about yourself and what ultimately brought you into the education field.
All right, no doubt. So peace, everybody. My name is Justis Lopez, a Manchester, Connecticut native. I'm a son, a brother, an uncle, a chocolate chip cookie lover, a DJ, funfetti cupcake lover, educator, and I currently am residing in Philadelphia. So I bounced around in different cities, similar to Brother Kwame here in different kind of regions and places and spaces. And when I think about this question relating to education, I think about it as almost as if like I didn't choose education, but education kind of chose me. So growing up,
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to be an accountant. I had no idea what an accountant did. Real talk, I would get the question all the time from my teachers. What do you want to be when you grow up? What do you want to be when you grow up? What do you want to be when you grow up? And I didn't know how to respond to that question. So literally I would go on the computer and I would say what made money and what was a good job. And accountant came up at the top. And I was like, oh, I want to be an accountant. And it wasn't till my junior year in high school, I had some truly dope transformational educators. Shout out to Miss Wilgamith, currently now Miss Banis. Shout out to Miss Lister, currently now Miss Navarra, who taught this class called American Studies. And I remember enrolling in this class, right? And I was apprehensive about joining it. I was unsure. I was like, should I stick in it? Should I not? And they told me to stick through with it, fam. And it was the first time where I truly felt alive in education, saw myself reflected in the curriculum, discussed topics like hip hop, the American dream, had debates and conversations that were relatable to my life that I could relate to. And I was like, this education thing is kind of dope. Like this is where this got the capacity to be something cool. Now, mind you, I have had some really problematic experiences in education, as I'm sure a lot of people can relate to.
Right.
So when I had this experience, I was like, yo, education is real dope. Like I could really see myself in this capacity and space. And that's really when I chose to become an educator. I've had some real dope mentors in my life as well. Shout out to my brother Ryan Parker, which I'll talk more about, in this space, who've really served as a mentor, as a brother, as a colleague, and so many different spaces too. And my good mentor as well, Mr. Martin, who created an organization in middle school called Young Men's Leadership Group, where I really felt like I belonged in a space, right? But that always wasn't the cases, right? As I'm sure you could relate to, and a lot of other teachers who come on this podcast, they're like, education is really problematic in a lot of ways. It's really exploitive. It could be very, very Eurocentric. It could be very teacher-centric, where it's very rudimented and rigid, and where students don't feel seen or heard. And I have been in those spaces. But when I had some real dope educators really pour into me, I was like, you know what? I can see myself being an educator. And that's when I decided, applied to be a teacher, became a different organizations that were really centered on first generation college students from low income backgrounds that were really about trying to provide these opportunities, and then just got involved. And from there, my educational journey and experience has kind of just taken me on different paths. I kind of call myself a purposeful nomad, and I kind of go wherever the calling is, and I just kind of follow that flow.
No, that's what's up, man. And you were mentioning former teachers and everything. And here's the crazy part that I found out in my research of you, man, because I research all my guests just to be prepared. And what's crazy is your boy Ryan Parker, who's a friend of the show, good brother. I didn't know he was your former teacher, back in the day, which is crazy. But now he's your business partner too. So I want you to just talk about the impact that Ryan has had on your development, not just as a human being, but as an educator and advocate for young people in general. Because, Ryan is just a dope person, humble to the core, but he's someone that needs to get his flowers. So I want to give you an opportunity to share the impact that he's had personally in your life.
No doubt, fam. And thank you for providing this platform and space to share that, right? My brother Ryan Parker is light, right? Just through in and throughout. Everybody feels that. Everybody says that, and everybody really, really appreciates that about this brother. And growing up, I had Parker in middle school, so I went to Illing Middle School. And I remember walking down the hallway, young little homie, like I'm, in middle school trying to figure out life. And I always have Parker in the corner of the hallway beatboxing. So Parker would always, like anytime somebody would walk past his room, he'd have it open. There'd be music playing, DJ. Like it was just like the vibe, right? Like all students wanted to be a part of that energy and space. And I always remember walking by and just kind of kicking something with Parker, right? Whether it was a freestyle or checking in. And not only just in that capacity, right? I appreciate him being able to provide those environments for myself, but other students. But my brother and sister also had Parker and his wife as well as educators, right? So when we think about this, this is deeper than just a relationship between, my brother Ryan Parker. It goes back into communal, right, and family, intergenerational change and intergenerational education, right, which is really at the crux of education when we think about what education could look, feel, and sound like. And that's what Parker embodies. So, taught for a couple of years, did a couple of things, and then came back to work in Manchester. And Parker and I were OD hype. We were like, yo, fam, we get the capacity to now work as colleagues. That's something that is such a blessing to be able to have. And I just appreciate Parker being able to welcome that energy and space. As a young teacher, as a young male of color, you don't have too many educators that come from a similar background that you do, right? So to see Parker in that light and lens was transformational to me, right? Like, I was like, man, this, somebody you could relate to, somebody you could kick it with, somebody who just align with your vibrational frequency in life, right? And I think about how important that is for educators to have. So yeah, we just started kicking off open mics, started doing open mics in the middle schools and in the high schools, and then coming back and providing those spaces for young people to really just be able to be their authentic selves, right? And as we know in research and personal lived experience, young people don't always feel that way. They don't feel like education is a space for them to be able to be themselves and to come alive and to create. You know what I'm saying? So why Parker and I became so close is because Parker's was the exact opposite of that. Parker was already tapped in. He was like, nah, it's about youth. It's about voice. It's about choice. It's about centering the voices of young people. And he was really about creating those spaces. Like, he wasn't just saying it. Like, no, he was taking the time to really get invested in the community. And that was somebody that I really just like admired and appreciated. And I'm like, all right, fam, yeah, let's kick this open mic. All right, word, let's do this. Let's get these young people in here. Let's bring in the family. Let's bring in the moms, the pops, the uncles, the brothers, the sisters, the great grandmamas, right? And bring them into this space. And I just appreciate that. Parker's always been and will always be one of my closest folks, mentors, and brothers in my life because of that. And he's always supported me in my moments of triumph and glory, but also in those moments where things were always looking so promising and optimistic, right? And when I approached him with the idea of like, yo, fam, like we want to build on this idea for Just Experience and with business, what's your thoughts? He's like, yeah, let's do it. So now we've collaborated with other folks too. Shout out to Matt Delaney, part of the fam. Shout out to Ashley Akwazi. Shout out to Renee. Shout out to, Q. Shout out to Aaron Ortega, right? This is a fam movement, right? And we all collectively stay together. So, definitely got to give big shout outs to the brother Matt Delaney. That's another great brother and comrade in the spirit.
Yeah.
As well. As you are as well. But I think about, when I approach people and people being able to, be so willing to move and be like, yeah, let's really re-examine the status quo of education and challenge that. I can hit up a Matt Delaney. I can hit up a Ryan Parker, and they're like, yeah, let's do this. I can hit up a Kwame and be like, yeah, like that's something that, you know what I'm saying? Like that's something that we should further explore. And that's what I'm just so appreciative about.
Oh, come on, man. Man, you just speaking some gems right now. But I know we talked about Mr. Ryan Parker, but let's shout out Mrs. Catherine Parker, his wife, who is also an educator, a principal, at a school in the area. So she's doing her thing, and I know she's just as humble as a husband. So yeah, shout out to her as well, and the whole Just Experience fan, which is a perfect segue into your business, your company, Just Experience. And I know it's a fan movement, but I want you to talk to us about what inspired you ultimately to start Just Experience and what's the overarching mission of the company? What are you all trying to accomplish with Just Experience?
Yo, I appreciate that question, fam. And yes, shout out to everybody who's just been a part of the movement and the fam. And Just Experience, our goal and mission, right, is to entertain, educate, and empower communities across the world through positive experiences to enhance the human experience, right? And that's really what we strive for. And Just Experience started off actually as an entertainment company, right? So when I was in college, I got a leadership scholarship, and that leadership scholarship, I really love music, I love DJing, and I invested that leadership scholarship into some DJ equipment. People told me growing up that I should be an MC, that I should be a DJ, that the energy that I had, would cultivate and create communities, but I never really acted upon it too much until that year when I got that scholarship. And it started off as Justice League Entertainment because I loved comic books and it aligned with my name, etc. And it was really just DJing different events on campus, creating community, small community events and block parties. And then once I graduated from school, I was like, you know what? There's something more to this. There's something more to the just like DJing and community involvement, which is super important. And I was like, you know what? I got together with some folks and fam, and I was like, let's rebrand this. And I was like, what are we trying to do with this organization, movement, and company? And I was like, what name really fits what we're trying to do? And we brainstormed all these different names, and we were like, you know what? This isn't something you could describe. It's something that you can only just experience. And that's where the name came from, Just Experience. It's something that we can't describe it, but it's something that is felt. It's something that is moving. It's something that is living. It's something that is ongoing. It's an organism. It's living. It's growing. And it's something that you must come in contact with to be able to feel it, right? And that's where the name came from and the kind of genesis and origin. And the past 5 years, we've been collectively building it. And now it's broken down into 3 components. Just Educate is one of our first kind of multidimensional facets and aspects of it. Just Entertain and Just Empower. And in Just Educate, Ryan Parker, Matt Delaney, the whole fam that I had mentioned before, we really strive towards revolutionizing the educational experience. And the ways in which that we do that is through professional development, workshops, working one-on-one with community organizations, summer camps, training sessions, seminars, institutions of higher education, K through 12. And it's really about creating radical liberatory spaces of justice, of joy, of love, of peace, of possibility, because we know through our experiences that is what is not celebrated and or highlight, but what is necessary to the critical development of educational spaces K through 12 and beyond. And particularly through a lens that is rooted in racial development and literacy and liberation, that is rooted in gender equity, liberatory expression, that is rooted in celebrating and highlighting marginalized experiences through the educational diaspora, because we know that those are spaces that just feel so isolating. And we know what happens when people feel isolated. They don't feel like they can succeed. They don't feel like they can grow. And when that happens, we are not fully honoring and acknowledging the humanity of folks, right? So what we strive to do at Just Experiences is that, right? So whether it's working with orientation leaders at a university and saying, what can you do to create a more inclusive orientation program to make sure that you're honoring all folks from all backgrounds and all spaces and all walks of life, and making sure that they feel welcome to your university, right? Or residential life. What are you doing as a university space and system to make sure that the community and people that are living at this university feel honored, feel welcomed, feel that their humanity is being acknowledged? Or maybe it's high school educators or middle school educators where we're like, let's examine some of your teaching practices and pedagogy, and how are you reflecting the needs, interests of your students and learning styles to be able to adapt to their individual needs. So what can we do to add some more magic, right? And add to the dopeness that you have already, because we know that teachers and educators, they have some dopeness and magic already in them, but it just takes community to bring that out. And it's the same thing with educators and the same thing with students. We know that students, particularly marginalized students, right, particularly young students of color, right, they have that genius, they have that magic, but it's disproportionately represented in ways that of which don't honor and acknowledge that genius, that intuition, that beauty, right? And it takes a community to bring that out. And maybe some teachers may have not had that in their teacher ed program, or maybe they are rooted in some really problematic, right, fixed mindsets, because we do gotta acknowledge that we are in a really oppressive and exploitive institution. Education is the most exploitive, oppressive institution when we talk about perpetuating and normalizing ideologies and norms, right? So a lot of educators have been normalizing that, and they don't even have the veil lifted up off the cloak, right? They don't even, it's almost like the Matrix. You're taking the red pill or the blue pill, right? And so many people are still enacting exploitive, problematic policies and practices. So what we try to do with Just Experience is, we're like, let's peel that veil back. Let's create some spaces for that. And center joy and center love and center happiness and center possibility. So, we collectively do that through education, but also through entertainment, DJing, block parties, community events, sweet 16s, trans ceremonies, weddings, things like that, and really trying to provide spaces of empowerment through the community lens.
Man, and this is why I had to have you on the podcast, because I know for me, like, even though I got you by a number of years, like, you inspired me, because when I first came into the education game, I didn't have the fortitude, I didn't have the courage to speak up and to advocate for what was right and just for our students, because I felt like I had to compromise a part of my own humanity as a Black man in order to advance my people within this ecosystem that we call education, public education to be more specific. So for you to just come out of the fences swinging the way you are, that's inspiring to me, because I wish I can go back in time and do what you're doing right now. And, now I'm doing it now through the podcast and other things. So just to kind of see you disrupting in the way that you are, it's so hip hop. And what's crazy is I have all these questions here, and you're pretty much answering the questions before I can even answer them, which is just so hip hop in itself, and that's the kind of conversation that I've been looking forward to having. So I want to go ahead and just ask you this, because I know that you are now in the world of academia at Stephen F. Austin State University. All right, got a new role there. So I want to know, how are you able to leverage your duality as a Latino man in academia, number one, but also just being DJ Pharaoh, aka Justice from around the way, in Manchester? How do you leverage your duality, within those spaces? Because that's hard for people to do. You want to be your full self and come as that in all spaces. But because of the politics and academia and other spaces, sometimes it's difficult to do that. So I want to know from you, what's your own process of doing that?
Kwame fam, I appreciate your vulnerability and honesty with that. And you are the true embodiment and living testimony, right? Of that. You are, I think about what is necessary and needed in this world and in education, right? And we talk about what are effective models of education. And it's modeling. It's modeling the exact type of environments and communities and teaching styles that you want to see and be. And that's exactly what you do. So I just want to say, thank you for that. Thank you for that love. But I also want to reciprocate that and just say, thank you for being that here in this space. Right. And in this conversation, I feel the energy, but also in the larger context, I see what you're doing, right? You're building a community, you're building a platform, you're building these spaces so that collective community to come together. So I'm encouraged too. And I'm also encouraged by what you have mentioned in the sense of like timeline, right? Like everybody's timeline is different, right? You know what I'm saying? And like, if you're a seasoned educator or just coming into the game, like it's encouraging to hear the testimony and experiences from folks, because you can make that change and impact at any stage, right? Whether you're a 30-year veteran in the game, you can still do the remix of the art of education and still try to transform and create these radical liberatory spaces for people. Or hey, whether you're a first or second year teacher in the game too, you know what I'm saying? You can create those spaces, and I don't think they're mutually exclusive, and we can always connect and build and grow. So I just want to say thank you for that, fam, and being a testimony to that. So in regards to navigating the duality or the experiences of holding different hats, right? I think about what's central to me, and what is a central core principle to me is my kind of life mission and goal is to create and embody radical liberatory spaces of justice, love, peace, and possibility for people to be able to reach their highest form of self. Like that's my life mission and goal, right? Like that fuels me, that guides me, that will impact me whether I'm having a conversation with a young toddler or having a conversation with a grown adult who's going back to school to become a teacher, or whether I'm having a conversation with the president of a university or a parent of a student that I'm interacting with. That underlying principle guides every conversation, interaction, experience that I have. And I've just been so blessed and lucky enough to be able to hold different hats. So formally, my background's in education. I had the honor to be able to teach back at my old high school at Manchester High School and teach there. And then my spirit called me to the Bronx. And then I moved there and I taught a couple of years in the Bronx. And then my spirit moved me full-time consulting. So I did JE for a couple of years and was a consultant for institutions of higher ed and did work with just real dope organizations. And then my spirit called me to DC. And then I did on the federal level. I was advocating for low-income first-generation college students to be able to have access to education, right? And then my spirit kind of called me to do higher ed and higher academia. And I was like, you know what? I want to navigate into this space. So currently now I have the opportunity to be able to be an adjunct professor in higher ed. And I teach intro to teaching classes. I teach intro to multicultural education classes. And I work with undergraduate students around activating and tapping into their greatness and their magic around becoming the best educators that they could possibly be, right? And that's my underlying principle. That's my underlying goal. And that's going to look, feel, and sound differently for each person. And the way in which I navigate that is not easy, Kwame. I'm going to be honest with you, fam. I felt a lot of the things that you're saying. I navigate imposter syndrome all the time, right?
Sure.
I navigate deficit-based mindsets all the time with myself included, right? Like I gotta recharge my batteries and instill positive affirmations and have those underlying mission statements and be in community with folks like you, because that feeds my soul. So it's definitely not an easy thing. I grapple with that all the time, but what does sustain me is having that underlying mission and goal, and then seeing where people are coming from, because you're right. When you navigate an institution like education, and any institution, right? When we think about collectively navigating institutions, ideologies, individual, interpersonal spaces, right? We talk about the different kind of forms of oppression and how that resurfaces, but also how that is able to be navigated, but also the different forms of liberation, right? Like if we can look at the ways in which we navigate institutions and spaces and how oppressive ideologies, institutions, practices, and laws are further perpetuated and exacerbated in institutions like education and higher ed, we can then look at ways in which to be liberated. So I'm not going to lie with you. I've been in meetings where like it's been mad difficult to see where people are coming from, right? And I felt that. And that's why part of the reason why Just Experience was created, because we can have our own autonomy and transform an institution without being inside the institution, but still have that impact. But then it's really rooted on relationships, fam. Like, you know, mentors that I've always looked at, like, you know, Dr. Bettina Love, Andre Lord, like, you know, our North Stars always talk about the importance of relationships, right? And a quote that I really enjoy is, when we think about revolution, right? When we think about change, when we think about transformation, when we think about these things, it's always rooted in relationships. And the revolution to me is rooted in relationships. The revolution is rooted in relationships and being able to cultivate that. So the ways in which I'm able to navigate these institutions is developing relationships, right? So I got to develop a relationship with the principal. I got to develop a relationship with the president. I got to develop with president of organization, right? Like the president of whatever. If I'm working in an organization or whatever it is, I got to develop a relationship with that person. Now, you know, past presidencies and leadership, you know, we could definitely debate on that, like whether or not people want to even be in those spaces and have relationships. So I hear that, right? Like that's deeply seated, problematic ideologies that are exploitive, that are trauma induced, that perpetuates trauma. So I hear you. Like not everybody you want to create a relationship with, and I honor and acknowledge where people are coming from with that. But the ways in which I've been able to do so is to develop authentic relationships with those people. And I may not always see eye to eye. And if I don't agree with a particular idea and or ideology, and I express that, right, and we're rooted in relationship and community, and then still on top of that, I don't feel comfortable, then I know that's the space I got to leave. right? If I'm sacrificing my humanity, right, and I'm sacrificing my morality, I know that's a place I got to leave. And that's always a line we have to draw in education. It's like, how much are you willing to compromise? How much are you willing to compromise, and how much are you willing to navigate, right? Like, and that's a real question that I've had to grapple with in every experience that I've been in.
Oh man, you are preaching right now, bro. But this is what I love, man. You put boundaries around your soul. And not many educators are able to do that because we're in a field where we're conditioned to not be brave. We're conditioned to not advocate for ourselves. We're conditioned to have to ingratiate ourselves with folks who don't align with our mission, with our principles, with our philosophy. And as you were sharing the different paths that you've taken in your career in education, they've all been rooted in your mission, which is all about centering joy, centering love, and centering liberation. It's all rooted within that, regardless of how different the roles are. And that's something that not everybody possesses as a skill. I just want to put that out there. So in certain ways, you're setting a blueprint for a lot of young educators who want to do what you're doing, but don't feel like they're empowered to do that. Now getting back to what you're doing now at Stephen F. Austin State University, right? You're teaching these courses, but I'm sure you're around tenured professors who have these fixed mindsets about teacher education. You're coming with this fresh new mindset that is maybe unconventional, out of the norm, whatever you want to call it. How do you try to get those tenured professors, those individuals within academia who may have been out of the classroom for a number of years or may have never been in the classroom, to try to see your vision and how it's impacting the students that you teach through your courses?
No, I appreciate you sharing that, family, and thank you for the energy and remarks. I think when I think about navigating these spaces, particularly having conversation with and discussing individuals who may be a little more seasoned or hold a formal title, that this is as a teacher, as an entrepreneur, as a professor, right? This is applicable. I always follow the lead of those I'm serving first and foremost. So whatever population I'm serving, I always follow their lead, whether that's pre-service educators, whether that's teachers, whether that's students, whether that's professionals, etc., and always allow them to lead and provide the space and opportunity for that. And I'm a facilitator. I also always allow the results to speak for themselves. So the process that of which I go about a particular idea, etc., may be different than the way in which another person looks like. But what's our goal? Like, if our goal is to create dope, inspiring, critically conscious educators, then how are we doing that? How are we listening to teachers that are doing that type of work and then letting them lead? If our goal is to create civically engaged students that are able to become productive members of society, that are humanistic and relate to one another and are full of empathy and growth and joy, then how are we letting them lead and showing us what that looks like, right? And I think it's always going back to who are you serving and how are you allowing them to lead, right? And we can have different philosophies and ideologies and beliefs, but we got to be aligned on a core mission. If your core mission is not to create dope, inspiring teachers and educators and allow them to be the best version of themselves, then maybe this ain't the space for you to be. Then right? And or if it is, then maybe it's about re-examining the ways in which you've been socialized, conditioned, and teach to look at that. Is it from a deficit-based mindset? Is it from one particular lens or ideology? Is it centering and uplifting only one type of idea or one type of body of knowledge or one type of mode of expression or one type of any aspect, right? And it's not easy. I'm I always want to preface any work that I do is something that is soul work, is times where I got to go back and reevaluate and reanalyze and rethink about. But I always center the voices of those who I serve and always let their experiences and results speak for themselves. And even if the results aren't what is outlined, then I push back and I say, well, maybe we need to reanalyze and look at what the results even encompass. Like,
Right.
what are we even trying to analyze and or establish or have as our grounding principles for what a body of knowledge or intelligence looks, feels, and sounds like? We have to reconceptualize what we perceive as education, as intelligence, as an educator, because that when we do that, that's how we recreate and reshift the paradigm of honoring people's humanity and then being able to have a world where people feel like they can be their full sense of self. But it's not easy. It's not easy. Constantly building with community, constantly reevaluating practices, constantly trying to figure out what works and what doesn't work. And you know what's real? This past year and a half, whether you're a seasoned professor, an adjunct, a teacher for 30 years, everybody's had to remix.
Come on
Everybody's
now.
had to learn. And if you don't remix and learn, then you will not be able to flourish and thrive and sustain. So we have to collectively remix in the art of hip hop and be able to serve the needs of our people. If we don't, then we will fail. We will truly fail those. And that's not what we are looking to have and or be and or embody as a community, as a society, and as a country. And it's something that I won't accept. Like, I won't accept that. And I don't stand for that.
And you mentioned something like this past year and a half with the pandemic being what it is. We have to lead with good pedagogy, because what I've noticed pre-COVID-19 is that a lot of educators get married to their scope of sequence. They get married to their Common Core frameworks. They get married to all these different prescriptive models that are provided to them. And this is one of the problems that I see with teacher education. You could attest to this probably, is that they don't affirm autonomy. They don't affirm freedom, liberation in terms of thought, in terms of innovation, in terms of just giving educators the green light, the executive authority to make curricular decisions, to make pedagogical decisions that are going to be beneficial and impactful to their student body. Because we're taught to follow this model, we're taught to follow this methodology, which may work for some populations, but not all, right? And I think, and this is why I need to thank you, because when you held up Dr. Bree Picower's book, and I actually had the honor of interviewing her maybe a week ago, and her episode is going to come out real soon. It's all about that, man. Like how whiteness shows up in our education spaces. And we've seen this, but we didn't even realize that it was this term. And now that we have the terminology and just the language to call it what it is, it's easier now to have these conversations like the ones we're having right now, right? But this is a perfect segue into Project Happyvism, right? Because we've been talking about centering joy, we've been talking about centering liberation, justice. This is what Happyvism is all about. So I want you to talk about the meaning behind Project Happyvism and what inspired you, and once again, the good brother Ryan Parker, to write the children's book, but also you produce a video based on this theme. So let's talk about Happyvism for a little bit.
I appreciate that, family. I want to give a big shout out to Dr. Bree Picower is a really close friend and mentor of mine. And I'm so thankful for her spirit and work and energy around decentering whiteness, around creating these liberatory spaces for communities of color, around shifting the paradigm and thought processes of teacher education. So Bree, much love to you. I appreciate you so much, your spirit and energy in this world and universe. And it aligns with creating these liberatory spaces, just like Project Happyvism. And Project Happyvism is centered on this notion and idea around self-love, sustainability, joy, and growth as a form of activism and radical resistance in a world that consistently profits off self-doubt. So when we think about Project Happyvism, It started back. Ryan and I were coming back from a conference. We put on an instrumental because we typically freestyle over beats, etc. when we process things. And the homie was like, "Yo, I'm listening to this instrumental." And I'm like, "Yo, I'm feeling really happy, fam." And he's looking at me and like, "Yo, fam, I feel happy too listening to this." And I was like, "Yo, I'm feeling so happy." And it was an instrumental that spoke to my spirit, spoke to Parker's spirit. And we were just like, "Yo, I'm feeling good with this." But then we started to realize that it was something more than that. So we gave each other homework. We were like, "Yo, let's write down what's bringing us joy," because we can oftentimes lose sight of that, the importance of joy, right? Especially at different seasons with exams and grading papers and the day in and day out and grind. We could lose sight of like what's really important, right? And centering that joy. So we gave each other homework. We started writing down some lyrics. We started to just, I literally would just go to the park and sit by a lighthouse. I love lighthouses. That's actually where my DJ name came from. DJ Pharaoh is actually lighthouse in Spanish. So I would sit next to lighthouses and write because I love like the embodiment of what lighthouses are and what they mean. And I would just write what was on my mind and what was centering joy and how I processed that. Like, so it was a form of therapy for me too. Like it was therapeutic to write down these aspects and ideas and constantly remind myself of that. So this project is twofold. I mean, it really is like a space to create liberatory practices, but it's also a therapeutic process for Parker and I to be able to work through these ideas and center this and constantly remind ourselves. So, we wrote that, we put it on a song because music creation and music therapy is a form of pedagogy that's rooted in hip hop pedagogy, right? That's a form of liberatory practice that the academy isn't tapped into yet, but there's folks in the academy doing that work, right? That's rooted in like hip hop therapy and creating these spaces of liberatory practices, etc. So, Park and I recorded that, went into the studio, and we were like, "Yo, fam, let's make a music video out of this." Called up some homies, made a music video in our hometown because it's also just as important to have visual representation, right? And have those images and experiences and see that in a video format. Made that, and then we were like, "Yo, fam, like, let's get this to the babies. Like, this is a message that the young people should have." And Parker and I, our background are not in like K-5 working with the little ones, but we were like, "Yo, let's make a children's book." Like this message is so important for young people to have, right? Because the younger you can teach the babies and the little ones really important aspects on identity development, on positive self-growth, on loving yourself, on celebrating aspects of who you are, particularly for Black and brown communities, right? Because that's oftentimes disproportionately represented in really problematic ways in media and in society. We wanted to flip that script and narrative and be like, nah, like we want to create a space of positive representation and joy and have that video be and book and project center this, right? Because that's not what we see all the time on media, on social media, on Instagram, all over the news and in society. So we created that, made this children's book, and shout out to Dr. Melissa Sue John, who's a part of the project, a part of Lauren Simone Publishing House. She's an amazing activist and scholar and mother who's created and creating, whose root mission is rooted in creating diverse children's literature for young people, right? And just to quickly reflect on that, there's less than 13% of the literature that is diverse in this country that really relates to the experiences of communities of color and Black and brown folks in this country. Even furthermore, less than that is actually written by males of color in this country. And even furthermore, if we want to take it another step, Black and Latinx men in this country make up less than 1% of the teaching workforce, right? So when we think about representation and what this project is really geared towards, like it's not only just like a fun project that Parker and I are really like creating, but we're really trying to change the narrative and change like these statistics when it comes to representation, when it comes to education, when it comes to people seeing themselves fully heard, acknowledged, and honored in a particular space. This project is really rooted in that, and we're really trying to flip the script on all of these statistics and experiences, right? And it's not about the numbers, but it's about creating communities that are flourishing and people seeing that and being a part of that. And that's why we call it Project Happyvism, because it's a project. It's not just a book. It's not just a music video. It's not just a song. this is an ongoing project that's going to have other parts to it, that's going to have additional aspects that we got to call upon people like you and your innovation and ingenuity and genius. So you're going to be a part of this project too, fam. We're going to tap into you because you embody that. You are the embodiment of Project Happyvism, and we need to highlight folks that are doing that work, right? So this is an organism. This is a living thing. This isn't just a book. This isn't just a hashtag. This isn't just some cool slogan like, oh, Happyvism, I'm feeling happy. Because it's not about that. Like, Happyvism is really about acknowledging the real trauma and harm that is experienced in communities. Because if you don't, then that resurfaces in really problematic ways, right? But it's acknowledging and saying like, yo, sometimes I can feel sad. Sometimes I can feel mad, right? And it's okay to feel that. But it's also just as okay to feel joy, liberatory love, and self-growth and possibility and joy, because that is what's going to sustain us. It's just as okay to have that too. And in the world where we try to navigate the dualities of this,
yes,
it is difficult. It's very difficult to navigate the duality of growing up here, of being in America, right? And I think about this project is really about that. So it's ongoing, it's growing, it's evolving, but it's really about self-love, creating communities of liberatory spaces for Black and brown folks, for young kids, for little babies to love themselves, to love your curly hair, to love your Boricua curls, right? You know, like love your hair, love yourself. Like, you know, like there's not enough representation with that. That's why I love books like Hair Love, you know what I'm saying? Stuff like that. But, you know, like I love my curly hair. Like I love my hair like this. And like, I wanted to create a book and a line that says, I love my hair curly. I wear it all out. I put a handful of contour in my hair. I get really nice back. Like, I wanted to write that because it's like, I constantly go into spaces where people will make a comment on my hair. And it's like, so many people get that comment, right? They're just like, oh, your hair is this, your hair is that. And it's associated with negative aspects. It's not associated with like, your hair is beautiful, your hair is this, your hair is that. And I wanted to highlight and acknowledge that because so many folks are like, nah, your hair is dope. Like, I love your dreads, Kwame. Them jokes is popping, fam. Like, your hair represents, it's so much. There's a story in your hair. You know what I'm saying? There's a story. There's a story in that. There's a rich, deeply seated ancestral wisdom and knowledge that is not understood and is not discussed and talked about in books. And that's so important for little kids to see that and be like, yes, like, I love my curly hair. I love my dreadlocks. I love myself for who I am. And I love to see positive characters that are talking about that. So that's what Project Happyvism is really rooted in.
Man. And it seems so simple, but Project Happyvism is a paradigm shift, essentially. It's a foundational element that we need to have in order to maintain momentum within this revolutionary movement. Because as you mentioned, there are times where you feel sad. There are times where you may cry. That's part of being a revolutionary. It's not supposed to be easy. There's going to be times of hardship. There's going to be trials and tribulations, but it's all about your response to all that. You know what I mean? And that's why I love the book is because it reinforces this idea of perseverance. It reinforces the idea of what our ancestors went through. Think about the enslavement period. People were singing spirituals as a way to bring joy to their spirit, as a way to get their minds out of the challenges that they were having on the plantation.
No doubt.
That's happyvism, yo. That's happyvism.
That's real.
You know what I'm saying? That's real. So this concept is more than just, as you mentioned, a music video and a book. This is real life. And in order for us to achieve liberation, happyvism has to be at the very center of that.
I appreciate you bringing that up, Kwame. I want to build on what you had mentioned in regards to happyvism is tapping into ancestral wisdom and knowledge that has come
Yes.
before us, but also we're becoming ancestors for others, right? So you talked about the spirituals, right? That folks would sing on the plantation. I think about how that correlates to like the island of Puerto Rico and bomba y plena, and how that was a form of liberatory practice in Puerto Rico, and how like my great grandmother would participate in that and sing and dance and be in these spaces of liberatory and joy, but still experiencing so much external forces that were against her and her being and existence, right? Like, so I think about how communities of color have been so innovative and so in the elements of hip hop, remix so many different frameworks of maintaining that sense of joy through, despite the most dire situations and circumstances. And this is what this project is tapping into. It's tapping into that ancestral generational wisdom and knowledge from people who've come before us.
Yes. And let's talk about hip hop for a second. I want to talk about specifically DJ, because you are a DJ, right? And as a certified hip hop head, I've seen the reemergence, if you will, of the element of DJing, because when we think about hip hop, we always talk about rapping, right?
Mhm.
And people tend to interchange hip hop with the rapping element, forgetting the fact that rap is an element within the hip hop culture, right? Because we have graffiti, we have DJing, of course, right? We have breaking, right? All these other elements that tend to be overlooked. And when you think about this pandemic, right, we've seen an emergence of DJing, especially with social media, right? And I'm going to use D-Nice as an example because,
Perfect.
as someone that's approaching my 40s, I grew up on D-Nice. I grew up on Boogie Down Productions. I grew up on KRS-One, Miss Melody, and that whole movement. So I've known D-Nice for, damn near 30 years of my life. And you have people in 2021 now figuring out who D-Nice is, but it's like, yo, I knew D-Nice from D-Nice to the Rescue. My name is D-Nice. Like, so I guess for me, I feel like with DJing, it's like one of those forgotten elements of hip hop culture. So I want to know from you, as a DJ, as someone who is a student of the culture, right? What are your thoughts about the emergence and also the increased attention of DJs during this pandemic? And do you also believe that DJ is an overlooked element in our hip hop culture? So I want to get your thoughts on that.
Yo, brother, I appreciate you sharing that and asking that question, and also just your deep-seated connection and authenticity, right? To just coming into this space fully as you are, which I love to see and celebrate, fam. So I love to see it. So thank you for this question. But I think about, right, you bring up some really good points around the elements of hip hop being a culture, right? So that's one key aspect to acknowledge and celebrate. When we talk about hip hop education, hip hop pedagogy, it is a frame of reference point of looking at a holistic culture and not just one of the 4 to 5 elements, because some people include like knowledge as an element too, that that many people refer to, that Kwame had just mentioned. But specifically in that context, right, I look at teaching pedagogy through the lens of hip hop, right? Like all of us are DJs as teachers and educators. We're looking at our crowd, which are the students, which are the teachers, whichever our audience is. We're looking at the crowd and we have to read them. If we don't read them, then we are not doing our role that we're supposed to be doing as a teacher, as an educator, as a community organizer. As you pick these different crates, as you pick the different songs, that's your different lessons, that's your different activities, that's your different ways of operating. And then when you play that, that's the ways in which people respond to your lessons or your activities or your ideas. And then the ways in which you mix in between or remix is essential to your sustainability as an educator. So when I look at myself as a DJ, it's rooted in that culture that's deeply embedded in a larger aspect of hip hop, which all of us should be embodying as educators, right? We should all be responding to the needs of our students and audience. We should all be remixing. We should all be listening to them. We should all be creating an environment where people are spirits and minds are moved. And that's what a DJ does. So as a teacher, I'm a DJ, but it's interchangeable. And I've always gravitated towards that deeply in my spirit because it's something that came way before me. I mean, similar to you, Kwame, I grew up in hip hop culture. My pops was a Brooklyn b-boy back in the 70s and 80s.
Wow.
And it's actually how I got my name. My father's government name is Jose William Lopez, but when he was growing up, got caught up in school and stuff like that and different things, and transitioned and really became a part of a group called the 5 Percenters that really embodied him and made him feel whole and be a part of a community, etc. And his new name in the hip hop scene was Justice Divine Allah, Justice of the Most High. That's my father's hip hop name, and that's like is rooted in something that's embedded in me, and that's how I got my name. My name is Justice, named after my father, who was a 5 Percenter, which is a deeply embedded community and culture that has deeply impacted and shifted, hip hop from Rakim the God to Lauryn Hill to Busta Rhymes. Big Daddy Kane. I mean, pivotal elements of hip hop culture, right, are embedded in this larger context, which I am a descendant of. That's my pops, right? So it's something that lives in through me and that I grow through, that I think about throughout my experiences. But then it just became a natural part of my being. Like I didn't even know this was a thing, that I could be a hip hop educator or a DJ and things like that. So that just continued to go. And then when I think about what that has meant in the context of DJing during the pandemic, I mean, shout out to DJ D Nice and creating the most liberatory spaces during the club quarantine. Like that was a go-to that people would pop on their Instagram live, stream that junk on the computer. You would dance, you would chat with homies. I mean, this homie is just revolutionary with that. Like he single-handedly created a space of like hope during the most like defeating time for so many people's experiences, and they would just come together and music, and then you had like all these superstars and celebrities popping in. Like
that's crazy, right?
Michelle Obama's pulling up, all these people just
Lotus,
like showing
everybody.
And like it's like, yo, I'm partying with the first lady right now. Like I never would have imagined that ever in my life. So shout out to D Nice, and shout out to my homie Andrew, DJ Overtime in New York. He has been really doing some really dope stuff that I really admire, and that has allowed me to just tap into the scene a little bit more with DJing as an educator, but also as a profession, as a love, and being in that space. And in this time, we have access to so much more now, right? Like people are DJing and creating these spaces online and providing these environments, and that's what I'm looking to do too. So I always try to create and build with communities in those spaces, whether it is, a new remixed edition of a birthday online on a Zoom and I'm DJing, or whether it's a graduation celebration, or whether it's a party, etc. The element and art of DJing, to originally kind of loop it back into what your original question was of is it forgotten, the elements, etc. And what is that played in this new season? I think about how critically important it is, that all the elements work in conjunction with each other, that they are all a part of an ecosystem, that the MC can't function without the DJ, and the DJ can't function without the MC, that the break dancer can't function without the DJ playing the beat, but the DJ would have nobody to DJ for if the break dancer wasn't breakdancing on cardboard, right? So I think about that, and I think about how they're all a part of an ecosystem of hip hop, and how they're all necessary and critically important in order to sustain the culture of hip hop moving forward, right? And I think about how everybody could be a DJ in their own regard and in their own way, because we are remixing constantly, we are picking the musical tracks, and we are responding to our audience. We are thinking of our feet and toes and remixing things. We are developing playlists, right? We're outlining different things and curating different environments for folks. So we're all DJs in our own right. And when we embrace that and fully see that, right, all the elements are fully acknowledged and celebrated.
Right. And I want to shout out some folks. I want to shout out to Ninth Wonder, one of my favorite producers, DJs, like Dr. Sean Woodley, who pretty much is about that as well. Teach, Hustle, Inspire. I feel like the DJs turn out to be some of the best educators out there, because DJing, as you mentioned at the very core, is improvisational. the art in itself is improvisational. And as you talk about curation, think about us in the classroom. When a lesson's going south, we have to gauge that. We have to gauge the mood of our students and make that audible mid-lesson and say, you know what, this ain't working. Let's scratch this lesson. Let's go to plan B. And you know, and you know, just do this assignment or this task. That's DJing in the classroom. You feel what I'm saying?
Yes.
So I feel like being a DJ helps in terms of you being great at pedagogy, because good teaching, you know, in essence, is about you having a feel for your students. And if you translate it to DJing, having a feel for a crowd, right? Because, you know, Rakim says, you know, you got to move the crowd, right? You know, Dr. Sean Woolley said, move the class. It's the same concept, even though the context is different. So I always got love for DJs, man. I always got love for DJs.
Yo, fam,
You know
I
what I mean?
appreciate that. I appreciate that fully. And I want to give a quick shout out to DJ Grandmaster Kaz, a DJ who's played a really pivotal, influential
Come on now.
role in my perception as a DJ, because what I appreciate about Grandmaster Kaz is that
OG.
he is a historian, which is another aspect of the DJ, right? Like when you're a DJ, you're pulling out carts and crates and different songs. What I appreciate so much about Grandmaster Kaz is that he's been able to just be so authentic and true to himself, but he preserves the history of DJs. And shout out to DJ Beverly Bonds too, some females in the scene doing some work too, because you know, I want to make sure that you know what I'm saying. I want to make sure that the females get their roses too, because we could always, you know, it could be a very male dominated space when we talk about hip hop. So I do want to uplift, you know, the females that are critical. Roxanne. You know, that are critical. She's not a MC, but I'm saying I want to honor and uplift those who females in spaces that are, you know, so pivotal to the development and growth of hip hop culture, right? And
DJ Spinderella, Salt and Pepper. Come on.
Yes, come on.
Like, you know, we keep going.
We go on and on, but I do want to uplift those narratives and stories and experiences and the importance of females in the context of hip hop, because it isn't talked about enough. But I just really, really admire and appreciate Grandmaster Cass for his ability to be a historian and a DJ. And I mean, I've been at his events and heard him talk with him, and just to have conversation with him and hear how he mixes a song from here and there, and to hear how people, you know, mix in from different forms of taking, you know, electricity from a pole in the Bronx and kind of sparking electricity to be able to DJ. I mean, it's just it's unbelievable to hear about that, right? And the DJ is a historian, as we all are, preserving those narratives and histories and experiences of those who come before us.
Yes, and I want to shout out Akua Naru, who Brian put me on to Akua Naru.
Dope,
like
homie.
When he came on, I was like, yo, I need to listen to her. And I actually listened to all of her music, and I was like, yo, she is like a beast. She actually has like a Bahamadia kind of filter, like the deep voice, but like that intricate flow. Yeah, shout out to Bahamadia, you know, Philly in the building, of course. So like there's so many, you know, dope sisters that we can name, and that will be a whole new episode in itself. And unfortunately we don't have, you know, all the time in the world to talk about that. But man, women, man, just women are doing it right now. So we definitely have to center them and give them their flowers when we have the opportunities to do so, for sure.
Yes, brother.
Yes. But I have one more question before we get to the lightning round. So let's talk about hip hop pedagogy. So we already know about, you know, the good brother, Dr. Chris Emden, Mr. Hip Hop Head himself. Shout out to him. It's become a bigger concept in our education circle, and you see a lot more people in academia talking about it, which is dope. Even good brother Mr. J. Rawls, Dr. Jason Rawls.
No doubt.
Like there's so many that we can name, but I want to know what your thoughts are about the evolution of hip hop pedagogy in K-12 education, from where it started to where it is now, because as you know, hip hop was never a culture that was accepted within the dominant culture. I mean, there was a time where, you had, the dominant culture saying that, man, hip hop should not be something that is in our schools. Hip hop is the reason why we have so many fights breaking out, so much violence, so much gang activity. And now, fast forward to now, you got white folks trying to rap.
Yeah.
You got vocabulary.
Yeah.
You got Dr. Chris Emden. You got Mr. Justin Lopez in academia. You got Dr. Sean Woodley. You got all these different people talking about it. So I want to know your thoughts on this, brother.
Yeah, no doubt, fam. And I appreciate you bringing up this point in regards to academia. And there's, I want to pay homage to those who've come before, because hip hop ed and folks doing this has come way before me, and it's going to come way after me. Folks have been doing this since the genesis and inception of public education and beyond, right? So, do give credit to where credit is due. From our North Stars like Dr. Chris Emden, Dr. Bettina Love, Pete Andy Hicks Harper, Dr. Tony Keith Jr., Martha Diaz, Dr. Lauren Kelly, Aisha Upchurch, I mean, Ian Levy, Edmund Ajapong. I mean, the list goes on and on and on with folks who are doing this work.
And can't forget the OG, Dr. Gloria Latson Billings. Can't forget the OG.
Of course, fam. So, like, these folks have been doing this work much longer than I have in the scene, and I always build upon the soldiers of giants that have come before us. I always give thanks and pay homage to those who are doing this work. But I think about what this has meant in the larger context of hip hop ed is that one is being acknowledged as a part of the academy, which I think is incredibly critically important in regards to that formal recognition. But also with that formal recognition comes the diluted aspect of it, or the commodification, and or, as you have mentioned, just the ways in which people are interacting and being in spaces and places. So I think it's super important to honor and acknowledge the history of where this cultural art form has come from, and really center that, but also use it as a way and a catalyst to transform young people's lives, because that is what it's doing. And that's what hip hop ed is really rooted in. It's about acknowledging that history, that wisdom, and creating these liberatory spaces for young people to fully express themselves in the modalities and ways in which that are so true and authentic to themselves. And I'm so thankful for folks in the academy that have recognized that and that are doing that work, and then bringing that to folks like us to be able to move forward with. But I mean, I think about how necessary and critically that is, because if I think back into my educational experience about the things that I've been involved in, it's always about creating spaces that I wish I had. It's always been about either like creating or being in a space that I wish I had. And it's like, when I think about hip hop ed, I've been so lucky to work with Dr. Ian Levy, for example, right? And create a hip hop centered recording studio for young people, right? And it's just like, like the importance of like hip hop based therapy, and being able to create a space where young people can write and reflect and then process their thoughts over a mixtape. It's like, yeah, that's what I wish I had growing up too. Like that's something that I wish I had, right? Like the process of being able to train a young person in the very real technicalities and entrepreneurial skills of being a DJ, and then allowing them to be able to utilize those skills and very real experiences, whether it isn't an event or community celebration, right? That's something that I wish I had too. Like I would have loved to learn that as a young person, like growing up. The culture and the ways in which of hip hop constantly remixing and reinventing and artistic design and expression, like that's something I wish I had too, like growing up, right? Being able to express my body of knowledge, right? My understanding of the world, and it goes beyond just like, because sometimes people conflate this notion of like hip hop ed being like, yeah, let me write a rhyme or a poem, right? That is one aspect of it, right? Which is an important element. Don't get me wrong. I never want to downplay that, because poetry and writing is a liberatory practice, but hip hop ed transcends beyond that, right? It's about folks like Aisha Upchurch who are doing transformational work at Harvard's hip hop lab about embracing dancing and hip hop as a form of liberatory practice and pedagogy, and how our body is a form of movement and liberatory space, and that people can be able to move, right? And I'm so thankful for that being acknowledged and that type of work being in that space, right? It's about artistic design and expression. Like if we think about graffiti and street art being a critical element of hip hop and how it's a culture and a form of pedagogy, like
Yeah.
hip hop culture is the globalistic culture that influences every aspect of the world. I mean, I was just reflecting on this not too long ago. Like when Obama was in presidency, I remember that the Instagram would constantly be referencing different aspects of like hip hop culture, like DJ Khaled, like another one, like major keys, like here are the major keys to tomorrow. And I'm like, yo, hip hop's in the White House. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like hip hop has such a globalistic influence that like world leaders are utilizing this as their frame of reference and point of view. But hip hop is always about remixing, right? Like that was in the past that when people were utilizing those frame of thoughts and being, and now what does it look like to remix and do that work? So hip hop pedagogy is rooted in all of that, right? And it's about acknowledging that ancestral wisdom and allowing folks to be their true authentic self and express their bodies of knowledge and work and being in ways that are true to them. And I think that's what really the academy and education is really tapping into.
But yeah, hip hop was in the building in the White House. I mean, Obama brought De La Soul to the White House.
Yeah.
Obama brought Bill Biv DeVoe to the White House. He brought the Roots to the White House. So many folks. And it's like, think about all the other administrations we've had in the history of the United States of America, you know, as far as the White House is concerned, right? The presidency. I can't think of another time where you would see those particular folks in the White House. Like people that we grew up on. Like, come on.
Yeah. Lin-Manuel Miranda, Hamilton. Like it's about the art of remixing. It's about the art of remixing and how are we centering that, right? And being able to really tap into folks who are doing this work and who've been doing the work, right? Like people have been doing this for a long time. And I always want to make sure that that's something that is acknowledged and understood when we have these conversations around this work that we're doing to create spaces for young people and educators and teachers that are liberatory. I just give thanks for those who've come before, and I'm just honored to help continue to build moving forward.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And you're just doing exceptional work, my brother. Exceptional work. All right, man. Let's get to the lightning round. Have a few quick hitters before we wrap things up. So my first question is, during this whole quarantine, do you have a favorite snack, guilty pleasure you've been, munching on?
Yo, fam, I've perfected my banana bread recipe. So banana bread with some chocolate chips. Oh, yes. That has been the Quarantine Chronicles for the snacks, no doubt.
All right. I like that, man. I like that. And next question I have is, if you can invite 3 influential figures to dinner, dead or alive, who would those figures be?
Fam, that's a great question. I love that's a hard one for me to answer, but I think I love hip hop. I love J. Cole. So I would love to sit down with J. Cole and have a conversation.
Come on.
I would love to sit down with Kendrick Lamar, and have a conversation. And I love to sit down with Big Pun and have a conversation, particularly around his influence and his ability to uplift the Bronx so heavily and be the first Latin hip hop Grammy nominated artist, and to just talk about what that was like. I'm a big fan of him and his son Chris Rivers, actually, too, who's a hip hop artist in the Bronx. Yeah, Chris. Yeah, he's the truth. So yeah, he's so ill with it. But I'd love to have a conversation with them.
But if I could speak on Big Pun for a second, I mean, Capital Punishment is a hip hop classic in itself. You know what I mean? And I look at Big Pun, I think Big Pun might be the Latino equivalent to Biggie.
Yeah. That's a fact, bro. That's a fact, man.
You feel what I'm saying with that? With that energy?
Yeah.
Right? Like they had such a short window of time where they had such a huge influence in the culture. And we think about their lyrical dexterity and their ability to ride the flow, like pun, man. Like
right?
this
Say it
new generation
literally,
don't know about
literally.
pun.
I mean, yeah, it's just
They
like
don't know about
the
pun.
the word scheme, the internal
Man.
messaging, the ability to have the lyrical flow and dexterity. I mean, it's just it's art, and it's art, and it's such a beautiful it's art at its magnitude, right? When we look at the ways in which that was able to be expressed, I mean, fully wholeheartedly.
Yeah, and he's someone that doesn't get enough flowers, man, for what he did for the culture. In the short time he was on this earth. God rest his soul. You know what I mean? Just a phenomenal entertainer. You know, and who knows what his career would have been like had he lived a lot longer. Man, he'd be up there with all. I mean, he's a great already, but man, just imagine, just like with
Agreed.
Biggie, just imagine.
Agreed.
You know,
I'm thankful for the time that we did have, and I love the Tupac quote. I never die because I live forever through my words and my music, right? And I think about that pivotal quote that I centralize with the work that I do, but also for the ancestors who are no longer here, how we are able to still participate and be in community with them through their music and their words.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. All right. Name one book that every educator should read, other than
Oh,
Happyvism.
no doubt, fam, no doubt. So I mean, I got a bunch, but Dr. Bettina Love, We Want to Do More to Survive. This is a critical text that all educators should be tapped into. The Home Girl, Reading, Writing, and Racism, Dr. Bree Pekauer. I mean, this is a necessary, pivotal text for folks to be reading. Yes, fam.
Come on,
I mean, these are
fam.
critical books to read. Another one that I'm an African American Latinx History of the United States by Paul Ortiz. This right here is given a phenomenal intersectional history of education through the Afro-Latin diaspora that folks should be most certainly tapping into. This book right here, this book is Anti-Racist by Tiffany Jewell.
Yep.
Yo, this book right here is such a great resource for like educators or pre-service teachers. She really breaks down what does it mean to look, feel, and sound like to be an anti-racist educator and you're teaching pedagogy and practice. And I just think it's such a beautiful collection. So those are just a couple that I've been kind of tapping into that I really highly recommend for educators, but not even just educators, like humans in this country and world to all be reading and tapping into to be a more well-informed citizen in this world.
All right. And those are all powerful books. Last question. Well, second to last question. What's the one thing that brings you the most joy?
So besides baking chocolate chip cookies, because that smell and making them is like, I love it. I love taking walks in community with fam. Like I love going on walks with my fam and those who I'm so blessed to be a part of in their lives. There's something that the synaptic connection to being a part of like nature and creativity and oxygen levels and flows. There's an entire science behind it, but actually taking that aspect and going on walks, something I really enjoy. But also I just enjoy being in community. There's something about even on Zoom, right? Because everything is energy. If we look at like if we break down the scientific like laws of energy, energy is neither created nor destroyed. It is just transferred. Like that's a law of energy, right?
A law of conservation. Yep.
Exactly, right? So if we think about that, right? So if we think about that in the context of like joy, right? What we say to each other, the vibrational frequency, that's a real thing. Like that's a scientific thing of like when you hear somebody say like it's a vibe, like it's a vibe. That's not just like a catchy slogan. It's a vibe is short for it's a vibrational frequency, which is actually a form of joy, which is actually a scientific principle, which is actually rooted in energy, which is actually a form of way of being. And anytime I could like be in spaces where my vibrational frequency is elevated, that brings me joy. So this right here is bringing me joy. Like I feel the vibrational energy and frequency, even though we're not in person, I can feel it. I feel the energy from you, and it is being given to me, and I'm absorbing and allowing that energy to be embedded and be a part of my being. And then what I do is I then give that vibrational frequency and energy to others, and that brings me joy. Anytime we can share in the exchange of joy and vibrational frequencies and channel that energy from one person to another, because it is neither created nor destroyed, it is just transferred. So if I could transfer that energy and absorb that energy, that brings me the utmost joy in my life.
Man, you just speaking it right now. You're speaking it. But man, Justis, brother, thank you so much for coming on. And I will say this is gonna go down as a top 5 episode for me personally. I'm just gonna say it right here, like real talk, man. Just the energy that you brought to this, and just the knowledge that you poured into the audience and also myself. I mean, it just cannot be quantified, brother. It cannot be quantified. So I appreciate you for coming to this space.
Fam, the feeling is mutual and reciprocal. I feel this energy in this conversation, and I will always hold that in my being and spirit, and always appreciate you and your energy and spirit in this world, and be in co-collective community with you. So it's mutual, fam. It's mutual.
Yes. And before you leave, fam, I want you to go ahead and just share those social media handles, even share the website for Project Happyvism so they can go ahead and cop that book, which I'm going to do myself because I need my copy. You know what I mean? So let the people know where they can find you, brother.
No doubt, family. I appreciate that fully. If you're on social media, handle is social_justice, JUSTIS. We can connect on Instagram, etc. If you want to get connected with Project Happyvism, follow Project Happyvism on the socials. Visit www.projecthappyvism.com if you want to get connected to that. If you want to get connected to the movement with Just Experience, follow us on Instagram and socials, Just Experience, on all of our different platforms. And we will stay connected. And we just deeply appreciate you all.
Yes, sir. And ladies and gentlemen, this is Mr. Justis Lopez. And once again, brother, thank you so much. And we definitely going to connect very soon.
Oh, no doubt. Before we take Grissom off, fam, let me get a quick screenshot and a smile. Let me get a smile real quick.
Come on, man. Let's
There
do
we
it.
go.
Let's do it.
3, 2, 1. All right. Much love. Much love.
Come on, man. All right, man. So we'll talk, man.
All right. Peace.
All right. Man, good people. This was just an incredible episode. I mean, if you didn't feel the energy through this episode, I don't know what to tell you. But we got so many incredible episodes coming up in the coming weeks, and I'm just so excited to be able to release it to you all when that time comes. But until then, good people, I want to wish you all a good morning, good night, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. And we're going to do this again another time. Peace out, everybody.